There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist, by the name of Laura Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, our problems will be fixed in about 5 minutes.
Chained herself to
She chained herself.
Welcome to episode 120 of Loomer Unleashed. I'm your host, Laura Loomer. We're live right now on Rumble NX, so please be sure that you head on over to my Rumble channel, rumble.com/Laura Loomer. Click the follow button so that you can subscribe and get notifications on Rumble. You'll need to enable notifications on the Rumble app on your phone. That way you never miss an episode when I go live. You can also click the Get Loomer button. A lot of you always ask how you can support my work each month. You can click Get Loomer, subscribe to my show for $7 a month or $70 a year. And again, we are live right now on X, so please be sure that if you're watching live, we have a lot to talk about tonight, that you head on over to my X account and you retweet this live link on my account at Laura Loomer and also on the Loomer Unleashed account. Be sure that you're following the Loomer Unleashed account. So much to talk about tonight. It's been a pretty busy week already. Tuesday. Momentarily, I'm going to be joined by our friend over at White Coat Waste Project. You know, Justin Goodman, the senior vice president, who we had on the show several times over the last month. Some exciting developments took place this weekend. Here on Loomer Unleashed, we exclusively reported the fact that Fauci's torture labs, where they were torturing innocent beagles and other animals, but mostly beagles. The funding for this was going to continue into the Trump administration. Everybody had known about the Fauci experiments and the torture of beagles because it was a really big issue during the presidential campaign season. And Fauci, of course, was put on blast for torturing these innocent animals, an investigation which was exclusively uncovered by the White Coat Waste Project, a fantastic organization, nonprofit, that is uncovering a lot of the abuses of animals in these taxpayer-funded labs. And we've been talking a lot about how $20 billion each year, especially your taxpayer money. We actually did this episode on tax day, if I recall. So that was on April 15th. We had Justin Goodman on tax day to show you how much of your tax money was going to be going towards funding animal torture experiments. And since that episode aired, the clips went extremely viral on social media, and it prompted responses internally. I know this from speaking to sources of mine over at NIH. It prompted internal responses from Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who is the newly Trump-appointed NIH director. It caused a frenzy inside the Trump administration and the White House when they figured out that under their administration, animals were still being abused. Not exactly good optics for the Trump administration. And then over the weekend, Elon Musk actually reposted and replied to my tweet and said that he was going to be investigating and that Doge was going to be investigating under his watch and that he was going to put an end to the animal torture that was still happening in our country. And so I'm going to go ahead and play this clip for you. This was Dr. Jay Bhattacharya on Fox News over the weekend announcing that this Beagle lab that was still doing these horrific abusive experiments on beagles inside the NIH headquarter office, which is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya's actual headquarter office in Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland, where NIH headquarters campus is located. They, of course, were, very flustered with the fact that I, pushed this information out there. And they didn't like the fact that I was, having white coat waste on my show and bringing awareness to the fact that, we were gaslit. We were told that Biden and Fauci were so evil for allowing this to happen. And yet officials within the Trump administration have been allowing this to happen. I mean, we are already past 100 days of the administration and they're still torturing dogs. And the torture still hasn't ended. We're going to be talking to Justin Goodman about that tonight. But I am very happy to report that thanks to the viral nature of the reporting here on Loomer Unleashed, these exclusive receipts that were brought to me by the great folks over at White Coat Waste Project, the NIH Beagle Lab on NIH's campus has officially been shut down. Let's go ahead and play this clip.
Is it hard right now to change the culture there?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, it's been interesting to watch. Like I'll do some policy change, and people like try to find the worst possible spin for it. I'll give you a couple of examples. So, for instance, I put out a policy to make sure that we have when we use we have animals in research that we look at alternatives. It's very easy, for instance, to cure Alzheimer's in mice, but those things don't translate to humans. So we've put forward a policy to replace animals in research with other technological advances, AI and other tools that actually translate better to human health. But then I'm getting and we got rid of all the Beagle experiments on the NIH campus. But it's sort of like people just don't trust the NIH anymore, and I can understand why. The NIH during the pandemic leaned into lockdowns, school closures, all these things, and so I think there's still a level of distrust that the American people have for the NIH that I'm hoping under President Trump we can reverse.
Has PETA reached out to you and told you you're the latest hero? They must be ecstatic with you right now.
They did. I got flowers from PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Normally, I think NIH directors tend to get physical threats, but they sent me flowers.
So he's talking about how PETA sent him flowers and how excited he was that PETA sent him flowers. Well, PETA should not really be taking credit or responsibility for these experiments, given the fact that this investigation was done by the good folks over at White Coat Waste. And Justin Goodman's going to be joining me in the next 10 minutes to discuss all of this. But I got into it with PETA over the weekend because, look, I think it's really important that proper attribution is given and proper credit is attributed to the original source of content. And it was White Coat Waste that actually uncovered all of these horrific septic shock experiments that were being funded by our taxpayer money via NIH. And, you could see I got into it with PETA. You can scroll down and see what they had tweeted. Scroll down a little bit more. They said, "Victory! PETA exposed the failed sepsis experiments on animals and even sued NIH under President Biden to end them. Now the sepsis Beagle study has ended. Thank you, NIH Director Jay." And for the shout out at the end. Well, he wasn't giving them a shout out saying that they were responsible for this. He said, PETA sent me flowers because Rachel Campos Duffy was making a joke about how, the radical leftists over at PETA, they generally, hate conservatives. And PETA has falsely accused President Trump in the past. You could look this up yourself and see. PETA has falsely accused President Trump of not doing anything to end animal cruelty and to not do anything to combat animal testing, even though in 2019 it was President Donald Trump, and we have the receipts to prove this. If you want to go do a fact check right now, live on air. In 2019, it was Donald Trump who actually signed an executive order making it a felony if you engaged in cruelty towards animals. So President Trump has always been focused on helping animals and ending animal cruelty. But again, this is a vetting crisis, right? Like, this is what I'm talking about every single day when I talk about the vetting crisis. It's the fact that, President Trump may be opposed to animal cruelty, right? You see that President Trump signs animal cruelty bill into law. Open that one. Making it a federal felony, November 25th, 2019. The bill passed unanimously in the Senate earlier this month. So President Trump has always been against animal cruelty, but you have people in his administration that don't alert him to these things. They gatekeep. You see that even CNN over the weekend wrote an article about how weird it is that I still don't have a press pass. You can look that up yourself and we'll get that article up on the screen. Why do I bring this up? Because you have all these yahoos who get invited into the White House press room. People that are more like influencers. You know, I'm a real journalist. I break really big stories and my reporting has been quite consequential. You might have, heard about it over the last couple of weeks. A few people got fired at the NSC and the NSA. I don't know. You may have heard about it. A federal prosecutor got fired out in California. I don't know. You may have heard about it. So, I'm not just posting selfies of myself with my tits hanging out like some of these other women that get invited to the White House press room. Real story, by the way, in case anyone wants to challenge me. Got the cleavage pics and the receipts to prove that. You have these like Jew-obsessed social media influencers who have been invited to the White House, people who accuse Jewish people of having like pedophile tunnels underneath the sewage system. I mean, seriously, people like that have been invited to the White House press room. You have Jessica Reed Krause, who like literally wore a shirt that said she was, in favor of freeing Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving 20 years in prison in Florida for human trafficking and serving as Jeffrey Epstein's associate, known pedophile associate. So those are the kinds of people that are being allowed into the White House and given press access into the White House. I mean, it's almost like state media in a sense. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you had a new media briefing the other day and you actually had a reporter ask the press secretary how they should be covering the Trump administration. Like, why are we asking the White House press secretary how we should be covering the Trump administration? Like, you wouldn't be asking the Biden administration how you should be covering the Biden administration. It's very reminiscent of state media, some of these new media briefings. And again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but as the CNN article highlighted, they think that the reason why I have not been allowed to have access into the press briefing room yet and have not been given a press pass is because I'm not a sycophant and I actually would be holding other Republicans accountable and asking questions about stories that, who knows, maybe the White House or maybe conservatives themselves don't want to talk about because perhaps it's embarrassing to them. I don't know. I don't really know what the reason is. I don't want to put words into their mouth, but it is quite interesting how, this story only went viral because I made it go viral on my show and talking about it on my website with my exclusive reports with the investigative receipts provided to me by White Coat Waste. And yet it took them almost a month to take action on this. And now everybody wants, applause for the administration for ending this Beagle lab. And yeah, it's great. It's really great that they ended the Beagle lab testing, but why did it take them so long? I mean, maybe if they actually invited real journalists into the press room, and it's funny because I get called a conspiracy theorist, but they actually invited real conspiracy theorists into the White House press briefing room, but called them journalists. So there's people on there that have TikToks and they don't even post any news stories. They just post social media clips. They don't break stories. They're not journalists, right? These are people that talk about like celebrity gossip on TikTok. And I don't really understand how that warrants a press badge. I don't know. I don't control the press room, but it's a little strange. So, but I was kind of surprised this week to actually see a real article written by CNN because it was pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate. It's one of the only articles thus far that has been accurate in terms of their reporting about the situation. You can scroll down while we wait for Justin to join. He just texted me. Let's see. Yeah, let him know. It's going to be connecting momentarily. So let's go through this article. Laura Loomer can get President Donald Trump on the phone, but she can't get a seat in his briefing room. As the White House opens its doors to a new class of media personalities, online commentators, podcasters, web video hosts, and partisan influencers, one of the most prominent figures in the pro-Trump digital ecosystem remains on the outside looking in. Loomer, a far-right provocateur with a loyal online following, has a direct line to the president and a proven record of influencing his personnel decisions. Yet her requests for press credentials from Trump's White House have gone unanswered. You can scroll down. Let's continue reading. Loomer has a theory why. I do think there's a fear that I may ask questions about the loyalties of people in the White House, Loomer told CNN, and they fear me having a national and global microphone to ask those questions. She wants to know why Hunter Biden, the son of the former president, still had Secret Service protection after Trump took office. He revoked it in March, days after Loomer posted pictures that allegedly showed a detail joining Biden in South Africa. Why the White House legal team isn't pushing to disqualify judges she sees as conflicted. And most of all, why certain staffers with what she claims are questionable allegiances have been hired in the first place. I would hold people accountable, Loomer said, not to be malicious toward anyone in the administration, but to support the America First agenda. The White House did not respond to her request for comment. Yeah, of course they didn't respond to her request for comment because, well, why would they? Why do they want to admit that there's gatekeeping going on and that, you know, it's a form of censorship, really? We're told that the new media seat is going to be available to independent journalists and that people like me can apply and get in. And yet every single, you know, social media influencer, again, I'm not an influencer, I'm a real journalist. My reports have literally led to Hunter Biden getting his Secret Service revoked and Ashley Biden having her Secret Service revoked, saving millions of dollars a year in taxpayer money for the American people. It's a lot more than a lot of these other yahoos who get invited. I mean, oh, what do they want me to do? Dress up in a little skimpy dress and wave a fake Epstein binder around and, you know, push out propaganda, like state-run propaganda for Pam Blondie? Is that what it's going to take for me to get a White House press pass? Do I need to sit there and, you know, blow smoke up Pam Blondie's asshole and tell her how amazing she is and how I think she's so brave for lying to the American people about the Epstein files, which have now gone missing? Yeah, the Epstein files have gone missing. Absolutely. Because we were told, right? We were told that, the Epstein files are on my desk. The Epstein files are on my desk. The Epstein files have been delivered in a truck. The Epstein files are, you know, going to be released momentarily. The Epstein files have been given to all of these, you know, social media influencers, right? That's just another example of just how poorly run these media briefings are. Yeah, they're just being poorly run. I hate to say, I'm not trying to talk shit about the White House press room and people are going to say, oh, well, that's not a way to get a White House press pass. But you really honestly, you know, just look at the receipts. Look at what CNN said, right? My reporting led to Hunter Biden having his Secret Service revoked. It led to NSC officials and the NSA director literally being fired. And it literally just led to them shutting down a taxpayer-funded laboratory where they were torching beagles in my collaboration with my next guest, Justin Goodman of White Coat Waste. And yet I have to wait a month or sometimes 2 months for the White House, these geniuses who work for Donald Trump, to catch up to my reporting and then, you know, give the information to the president, lie to the president and pretend like this is their information, even though it came out a month or two prior. And then the American people have to suffer. These beagles have to suffer. How many animals could have been, you know, taken out of these abusive situations months prior or weeks earlier if it weren't for gatekeeping in the White House? Okay, because of professional jealousy or whatever reason it is. God only knows what the reason is, right? But you know, it's kind of ridiculous in my opinion. So joining me now to discuss this development and how there's continued animal abuse projects, believe it or not. I mean, even though there's this big hoopla and big celebration now in the Trump administration, and they're celebrating the fact that all of these beagles have been freed, there are still animals being tortured, believe it or not, in U.S. taxpayer-funded laboratories, both here in the United States and also in China. And a lot of this is being run through the NIH and also the Department of Defense. And we're going to talk about it tonight because it's important that we talk about it and that we don't get gaslit by Republicans who are more concerned with their reputations than they are about the facts. So joining me now to discuss is White Coat Waste Senior Vice President and my friend, Justin Goodman. Thanks so much, Justin.
Laura, I'm thrilled to be here to take a victory lap for saving beagles, making animal protection history by shutting down the last dog lab inside the NIH headquarters, something we've been working on for 9 years, nearly a decade. I've been working with my team at White Coat Waste Project, our president, Anthony Bellotti, to find, expose, and defund this exact laboratory. We filed Freedom of Information Act lawsuits, worked with Congress to introduce legislation, countless fact-finding letters pressing the NIH, fought the Biden administration for access to documents. And now, I know you just broke some news. We're learning that just a few weeks ago, NIH was defending and doubling down on these dog experiments. And now you've released new records that we just got through FOIA today, showing that this project was actually approved to continue through 2026 and kill 24 beagles. And that ain't going to happen anymore, thanks to you. So we are incredibly grateful, thrilled, but as you're saying, there's more work to be done.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible progress and incredible work. And what I find to be really disingenuous, and I think it's really concerning, and we have to talk about this, unfortunately, because it's really central to this work, is the fact that organizations that are not responsible for these investigations are now taking credit and fundraising off of your work, which is unethical, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And it's really funny. I'm not going to show the email tonight, but PETA actually personally emailed me. One of their vice presidents actually emailed me the other day to try to suggest that you were just a disgruntled former employee and that, you know, White Coat Waste didn't actually break this story. It's actually PETA's work. And you have the facts wrong because the person that's complaining about this is a former disgruntled employee. I wanted to give you a chance to respond to this because as somebody who often has my work stolen by people and people love taking credit for my investigations. And then, you know, there's like this constant, you know, cycle of abusive gaslighting where people call you jealous or they say you're disgruntled. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about this investigation and how long you have been fighting to shut these labs down, because for people that watch my show, they know that we had you on weeks ago on tax day. I didn't see any other conservatives talking about this. We've been sharing these clips almost every single week for the last month, talking about how the DOD is still funding experiments where they shove marbles and condoms up cats' buttholes. And I don't really understand the purpose of these experiments, but it's being funded by our taxpayer dollars via DOD contracts still being extended under the current Trump administration. And I didn't see Pete Hegseth, and this isn't an attack on Pete, of course, but I didn't see Pete Hegseth in the press conference the other day in the Oval Office. I didn't see Jay Bhattacharya mentioning this the other day in the Oval Office. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity tonight to talk about the attacks on White Coat Waste, but also talk about the gaslighting by our government as it stands, because there are still a ton of extended animal testing experiments that are being extended by the current Trump administration. And it's not good enough to simply have a press conference in the Oval Office and shut down one Beagle lab.
Yeah, I agree. This is just the beginning, hopefully, and it shouldn't have taken 100 days to get here. We had talked to folks in the administration and been talking to folks before they even came into power in January, and letting them know our list of priorities and easy cuts they can make to promote Trump's agenda of cutting waste, fraud, and abuse at the NIH, cutting foreign aid. And it took over 100 days to get this first big win. So yeah, we really did hope to see more swift and decisive action from the administration. And, you know, one thing, again, great that they closed the dog lab, but before doing that, the first announcement they made about animal testing was something that was very clearly inspired by PETA and other animal rights groups, which is simply creating a new office that just creates more bureaucracy and more spending with the, and I know you commented on this in a few different places, Laura, that they are creating more bureaucracy, more spending, creating a new office that will aim to possibly reduce the use of animals, but no promises that they were going to make any cuts. And that's not enough. That's not what the MAGA agenda is. That's not what the President Trump and RFK promised at NIH. They promised they were going to slash and burn, remove Fauci's legacy and fingerprints from the NIH and the federal government. And we're seeing the opposite happening. We're seeing, certainly we have this great accomplishment with the NIH dog lab. We're thrilled to see that. But the NIH is still funding hundreds of dogs and cat labs across the country outside of its headquarters. that are still receiving taxpayer dollars that are still being renewed. The NIH just renewed a grant to the University of Missouri where they are infesting beagle puppies, 398 beagle puppies, with ticks and then letting them suffer in maximum pain experiments where they don't get pain relief. That was a project that started under Fauci, was approved under Fauci, was renewed under Fauci, and now has been renewed under the Trump administration at the NIH. So we're certainly alarmed by that. And I want to get back, I'll talk about some of the other stuff you said in a second, but I want to get back to the point you made about things needing to move quickly and what the consequences are of them not moving quickly. There's a contract, you were just talking about it, an active contract, DOD and NIH funded, to torture 300 beagles a week in a lab in China to test experimental drugs. 300 beagles a week. And this contract is scheduled to run for a few more weeks. It's possibly getting renewed. Contracts are renewed all the time. So every single day, every single week we delay in cutting this grant, 300 beagles are being tortured because there is not the political will at the NIH to make what seem to be easy decisions. Cutting off dog torture in China should be something you can do in your sleep without having to check with anybody. And everyone's going to be thrilled about that. The left, the right, the center, the president, RFK, everyone's going to be happy with cutting dog torture in China. So I'm not sure why it's so difficult for some of these cuts to be made. So we have the Fauci dog labs. We have the DOD dog lab in China. We have the cat experiments, $10 million the DOD has spent and just renewed to do those constipation and erectile dysfunction experiments on cats at the University of Pittsburgh. The DOD is funding a dozen dog and cat labs across the country. We have a list from the DOD of those exact projects. We've sent that list to Doge months ago, and we haven't seen any cuts yet at the DOD. Fortunately, Elon Musk, in response to your tweets last week, and your reporting last week about the renewal of the cat experiments at DOD, commented not only will Doge investigate
shock experiments too. So I will say, to Elon's credit, I mean, who knows if he's working on trying to get these other experiments cut and defunded. But to Elon Musk's credit, I will say that the tweet that he replied to was the tweet in which we were talking about the beagles receiving septic shock experiments in the NIH headquarter laboratory at the NIH campus. And just 2 days after Elon replied and said he was going to investigate and put an end to animal torture is when Dr. Jay Bhattacharya quietly announced on a Sunday afternoon on Fox News that the lab was being shut down. And then they quietly mentioned it inside the Oval Office when they were giving their press conference, having a meeting with RFK Jr. and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, talking about the executive order that President Trump just signed the other day, eliminating gain-of-function research in China. But again, I'm grateful that President Trump, and I want to get your comments on this, is ending gain-of-function, but we also need to be checking the receipts on this, because just because he's ending gain-of-function funding for labs doesn't mean that it's ending the animal abuse and the torture and the use of beagles that are shipped from the United States of America, breeders paid for by NIH or, which is our taxpayer money, and then shipped to China for experimentation. They may be ending the gain of function experiments on the dogs, but it doesn't mean that they're ending all the experiments on the dogs. And so how do we get accountability, and how do we monitor these tests going forward to make sure that it's not just an issue of semantics and that they really are making steps towards ending? Because last week as well, later on in the week, and of course this was after the scheduled programming here on Loomer Unleashed, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya released a press conference in which he said that the NIH was going to aim to reduce animal testing, but wasn't exactly committed to completely reducing or eliminating animal testing. And so I want to get your thoughts on that, because look, I'm a straight shooter. It kind of just seems like we're getting fed crumbs right now to cover up for the fact that these even more atrocious animal experiments are still taking place with our taxpayer money.
Yeah, and we're seeing, something like Monkey Island in South Carolina, in Congresswoman Nancy Mace's district. We've been working with her since 2021 to shut this down. An island Fauci helped establish, where 3,300 monkeys are bred, and then 500 to 600 of them are snatched off the island and shipped to Fauci's virus labs all across the country for deadly experiments with things like Ebola and Nipah and Lassa and completely incurable viruses, including exotic viruses from all around the world that would never occur in America. We're bringing the viruses here and then we're infecting monkeys with them. I thought shutting down Monkey Island would be a slam dunk under Trump's NIH. Unfortunately, Monkey Island just got renewed for another year at the cost of $4.1 million to taxpayers. So it is frustrating. And I think we need less press releases and more action. And the action we want to see, the action we were promised, was slash and burn at the NIH. The Trump administration has proposed a 40% cut to the NIH's budget. I doubt Congress is going to go along with that. But I think we might see some major cuts there. But something we can do without Congress, without an executive order, is Dr. Bhattacharya sitting down and just making a list of animal tests that are going to be cut effective immediately. They can also do things like they did in the last administration that we've been advocating for and recommending. They did make some decisions that impacted animal testing under the last administration, including eliminating funding for human fetal tissue experiments. That's something we exposed during the last administration, and during Biden, Fauci was responsible for most of the funding, where they take parts of aborted fetuses and implant them into lab animals. 90% of the human fetal tissue research involves animal experimentation, and they completely shut it down under the Trump administration. It was essentially a press release from the HHS saying, effective today, we don't fund this stuff anymore. And we can see that NIH and HHS could be doing that tonight for dog and cat experiments, funding for labs in China, Iran, and other adversarial nations, all foreign funding. I mean, these are things that if there was the political will to do so, they would be very easy. What we're alarmed with is that it seems like people who are not on board with the agenda of really cleaning up waste, fraud, and abuse at the NIH are still in power there and calling the shots. And there's no better example than a Fauci acolyte who worked at NIH, who in Fauci's division worked and was involved in gain of function, was involved in the COVID cover-up of what happened in Wuhan, has just been promoted to take over Fauci's position as the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. How do we end up in a situation under Trump?
We gotta name some names. We gotta name these people. Let's name them and shame them.
Jeffrey Taubenberger at NIH, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, just promoted. I think he's been there 19 years. Was just promoted as the acting director.
One more time. What's his name?
Jeffrey Taubenberger. Wow. And he's the acting director now of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Fauci's division. He's been involved in gain of function research. He actually instructed a colleague to dig up a dead body and collect the 1918 flu virus from that body and then bring it into the lab to use in gain of function experiments. This is well established. This has been reported before. And then they put this guy, Fauci's colleague, now in charge of Fauci's former division. So of course, that's why Monkey Island gets renewed. That's why tick infestation experiments on dogs and puppies get renewed. That's how COVID infection experiments on cats at Cornell University.
It just makes you wonder, why do we have Fauci? And I want to remind everybody that Fauci was pardoned. Okay, he received a preemptive pardon by Joe Biden on the way out. And so, why do you need a pardon if you're not a criminal? Well, because you are basically saying that you have committed criminal activity, or you believe that Fauci committed criminal activity and thus needs a pardon. And so I just want to remind everybody of that, because there are still Fauci holdovers who are working at the NIH. And again, this all goes back to the vetting crisis and the gatekeeping in the Trump admin. Why are people from White Coat Waste not, in the Oval Office right now, a part of the conversation if it's their investigation that got these Beagle labs shut down? Like, shouldn't the people that have actually done the investigations be able to provide reports or research to the president of the United States to let them know, hey, these are the problem people that are causing issues, and they're probably going to try to subvert your administration? And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Donald Trump said he didn't want any more animal cruelty. And what do? You see people at NIH quietly trying to renew these agreements. We're going to get these screenshots pulled up right now, too. This is a new report that was just published momentarily before this episode went live tonight, because I wanted to save it for the show. Scroll up to the very top. Exclusive NIH's Beagle lab and other taxpayer-funded animal labs in China were set to continue being funded under Trump's administration. So, PETA and other groups are trying to say, oh, this was in the works. Don't worry, we got this all shut down. No, it was honestly only because of the pressure that Justin and I put on the Trump administration over these last few weeks that they decided to actually end this lab. You can go back to the article. I want to show you the actual dated FOIAs. So here's the emails that were sent. Thank you for your email to the National Institutes of Health Congressional Relations Office concerning NIH intramural dog experiments on sepsis. You can see the date was Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. This was the same day that Justin came on my program, Tax Day. It is important to note that NIH takes the welfare of animals used in research very seriously, blah, 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 blah. Please find below responses to your specific inquiries. This was a FOIA request.
And then on the second page of that letter, they go down.
Keep on scrolling down. Here's the letter right here. National Institute of Health, Animal Study Proposal, sepsis-induced cardiomyopathy. So they were trying to induce these beagles with sepsis and literally see how long they could survive with sepsis, of watching them, basically suffer and die from an infection. That's what they're testing, to see how long a dog can survive with sepsis. They're not giving them any pain medicine. They're just torturing these animals. And you can see that the approval date for the original study was approved on August 25th of 2023. And the expiration date was supposed to be August 25th, 2026. The expiration date was extended a year because, as he said, it was supposed to expire, believe, this year, right? And so you see here that this was sent, right? This was clearly sent by via this FOIA request in April of this year, right? So under the Trump administration, and that date would fall underneath the Trump administration, August 25th of 2026. And you can see, what does it say here? Clinical Center, Principal Investigator, Stephen Solomon, PhD, Center for Critical Care Medicine Department. Let's see, Functional and Structural. So the project title was Functional and Structural Changes Early in Sepsis-Induced Cardiomyopathy, okay? And then you can scroll down on the document, okay? Species canine, arrival criteria, stock or strain, Beagle, approved source, the holding location, redacted by agreement, estimated number of animals, 24. But we know from these requests that the location was, right, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the NIH campus. It's the NIH campus in their Beagle torture lab that they said that, they weren't going to be doing any tests under the Trump administration, but you can clearly see from that document that was received in this FOIA request on April 15th, 2025, that they had every intention of doing this. And so this was only shut down because we raised so much of a fuss about it. Obviously, you carried out your investigation, and then it went viral on my show, and then we got Elon Musk to comment on it. So I think that PETA and others should be ashamed of themselves for trying to take credit for your work. It was White Coat Waste that submitted that FOIA request and got those documents, that did the legwork to obtain this information. And that's the part that Jay Bhattacharya and the administration doesn't want to tell everybody when they're, taking their little PR spectacle right now, trying to pat themselves on the back for shutting it down. When in reality, they had every intention of extending the torture of these beagles.
Yeah, Laura, that email that you were pointing to that you just released for the first time, we've never released that to anybody. It's the first time it's coming out. That email was sent to Congress April 15th, like you said, the same day that I came on the show. And it made very clear that the NIH was defending those experiments, that they were currently active, and that they were undergoing review for continuation. That was less than a month ago. Then we get these documents through FOIA. That second document through FOIA we just got today through a Freedom of Information Act request, showing that the project was not only active, but it was scheduled to continue for another year and a half. And it might have, had we not worked together to blow this thing up and make the story go viral and get it on the agenda of the president, who I'm sure made someone in the White House called the NIH and asked them what the hell is going on, and they took quick action to get Jay on TV to cancel it. But we have been doing this investigation for 9 years. We have records from over 2,100 dogs have been killed in this lab, at least. We have records through Freedom of Information Act lawsuits against the NIH for over 300 of these dogs. We have been tracking every single purchase of dogs for the last 9 years, working with Congress on legislation, doing everything to get this in front of Congress, get it on the agenda, and get the NIH to take action. This is something we've been talking about with people who are now in the administration for 6 months, that this is the first thing they should do. And it took, as we know, we were well past for the first 100 days, and there still had been no action on this until me, you, and Elon got together and made it so no one could ignore it, and they had to take action. And there are other groups now trying to take credit because maybe they put out a press release 10 years ago mentioning in passing something related to dog testing at NIH, but no one was actually investigating and spending time, money, and resources. And that's the most galling part of this, is that we're a small nonprofit. PETA's budget is over 10 times ours. They have probably over
$75 million. $75 million is what their 2023 tax records show. And when I pointed this out and I said, shame on you as an organization. And also, too, I think it's important for people to know that PETA allegedly has their own kill shelter. So they're trying to act like they're so concerned about the welfare of these dogs, these beagles. And I saw them put out some tweets asking about, oh, we're going to be monitoring where these beagles go, now that these labs are being shut down. Well, what are you going to be monitoring? Because the last time I checked, PETA said that they're against pet ownership. I mean, they have made some very controversial claims in the past. There are people who have worked for PETA that have suggested that pet ownership is terrible and that animals should instead be euthanized instead of being owned by humans because it's not natural for pets to be owned and to be domesticated. And so, if that's their mindset, what are they so concerned about as it relates to where these beagles are going to go after they get rescued? Because the whole point would be to find loving homes for these beagles who don't even know what it's like to step foot on grass or to be in somebody's bed or to snuggle up in a bed with an owner or to play ball or to play fetch. Because some of these dogs who, we're gonna I don't want to give too much away, but we're gonna have some exclusive video and an exclusive report on Thursday's episode of Loomer Unleashed to unveil here as it relates to the rescue of some of these beagles who are now being rescued from laboratories. So stay tuned. This is going to be never before seen footage and photos exclusively released here on Loomer Unleashed on Thursday. But you're gonna see for yourself that some of these dogs, are 10, 11, 12 years old, and they don't know what it's like to be outside because they've lived in a laboratory since they were a puppy. So it's interesting to me when you look at the gaslighting, because when you look at the history of groups like PETA, I don't really feel like euthanizing an animal to prevent it from being adopted or being in a domesticated household as a pet is more ethical than euthanizing it, right? They think that euthanizing animals is more ethical than allowing loving pet owners to have them as pets.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Laura. And I did, getting back to the point you made it very early on, I worked at PETA almost a decade ago. I ran animal testing campaigns there. And number one, I've been on a bunch of shows recently talking about, and I think we might have talked about it, Sri Thanadar, Congressman Sri Thanadar, who ran an animal testing laboratory in New Jersey, who owned it, and it got shut down, and he left over 175 dogs and monkeys to die. I was working at PETA back then. It was 2010, and the head vet from there called me and frantic and saying that they left these animals for dead, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get them out of here. Dogs obviously into homes and the monkeys into sanctuaries. I went to the leadership at PETA and I said, we've got to get involved in this. We've got to help save these animals. And they said no. And now, because there's press, because Fox News is talking about it, because there's tons of news stories about our victory, that's why now all of a sudden they're interested in rescuing animals from these laboratories, because White Coat got a victory and PETA hates being left out. And that's what
And now
that's what's
they're
motivating this.
aggressively putting up their, pushing out more social media. I wasn't following PETA until a few days ago, and then I just, decided to follow their social media account when I got into it with them. And then of course their vice president and one of their media directors found my personal email. And they emailed me, and they were saying that my post was incorrect and trying to suggest that I was wrong and that you didn't have anything to do with exposing any of this, and that white coat waste didn't play a role in this, and that, oh, Justin's just a disgruntled former employee. But we showed the receipts. Actually, if we go back to this tweet that I posted in response to PETA, you can clearly see the congressional letterhead, and you can clearly see the news reports that say that this was uncovered by them. So let's click on my tweet first, the screenshot. This is from April 24th, because we talked about this on multiple episodes of Loomer Unleashed over the last month. It says the NIH is still funding Beagle torture even after we were told it would stop. New records uncovered by White Coat Waste reveal NIH extended funding for septic shock experiments where beagles are pumped with bacteria and slowly killed without pain relief inside, and the rest of it continues to say, inside the NIH headquarter office, which is what they just shut down. And then Elon Musk, go back to the tweet, said on May 2nd, we'll investigate. And then literally 2 days later is when Dr. Jay Bhattacharya went on Fox News. 2 days later, on May 4th, I believe it was Sunday, May 4th, and he said that they were shutting down this lab. And so let's click on these screenshots here.
Yeah, and I just want to
Purchase
point out,
records.
these are years old. Yeah.
Purchase records and research documents obtained by White Coat and shared with 8 News showing Vigo has sold about 60 dogs over the last few years to be used in septic shock experiments at NIH. So you have ABC confirming that this was obtained by White Coat Waste. Let's go to the other screen grab as well. Here we go. The Washington Post, not exactly conservative media. Should dogs be guinea pigs in government research? A bipartisan group says no. White Coat Waste was mostly unable to find information on the breeds of dogs used in federal labs, although it said most dogs used in research are beagles, citing NIH materials. In one NIH study, the group found researchers induced septic shock in beagles with pneumonia, sometimes causing hemorrhaging and lung problems, to compare transfusions of fresh and old blood. Even Washington Post is saying that the group, okay, they're talking about White Coat Waste found. Next, let's go to the next screenshot. January 19th, 2024. Okay, this was sent to Dear Director Bertagnoli at the NIH. Okay, that was under Fauci, of course. Given the National Institutes of Health is the single largest funder of painful research on dogs, we are writing to urge the NIH to support alternatives to harmful animal testing. The 2022 cancellation of completely unnecessary drug tests, on dogs being planned by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases underscored the wastefulness, taxpayer-funded dog research, and raised serious questions about NIH's oversight of grants and contracts. Since then, other troubling NIH-funded dog and cat experiments have come to light through investigations by the nonprofit, nonpartisan White Coat Waste Project. Okay, so nowhere in there does it say PETA. Okay, this is an official congressional letter. This is on congressional letterhead. It says Congress of the United States House of Representatives. This is an official government document on official government's letterhead, and it clearly is saying that White Coat Waste discovered this. And so perhaps I will publish the email that was sent to me by PETA. I mean, they were polite. They were friendly. I will say that, they thanked me for my work sticking up for animals, and they were cordial. They were respectful to me, but I just found it to be a little strange that they were trying to suggest that you were disgruntled when you're simply just pointing out facts. And I think it's important for people to know that they're not in support of pet ownership, because not only is White Coat Waste trying to expose these labs and get these labs shut down, but you also partner with an organization called Kindness Ranch that rescues these beagles from laboratories where they would otherwise be euthanized. Because if the beagles are, not to be used anymore, generally speaking, unless there's nonprofits that make partnerships and confidentiality agreements with these private labs or taxpayer funded labs, they kill all the dogs. And it's animal rescue groups that go inside and arrange for some of these dogs to be saved and then adopted out. So I don't know how much you can speak to this, but why did PETA tell you when you worked for PETA that they could not get involved in trying to save these dogs and adopt them out when this horrific case involving Democrat Congressman Rep. Shri Thanadar, the same scammer, and I call him a scammer because he's been sued multiple times for alleged fraud, had his laboratory shut down. And this, of course, made news last week because he's the same guy who's trying to impeach President Trump. Why did they say they couldn't get involved in saving these dogs?
Because in a lot of cases, PETA believes that animals are better off dead. And they do run a kill shelter.
Instead of having owners?
Yeah, or being in a situation that PETA doesn't approve of. Yeah. So it's frustrating. Here's the good news, all right? I don't want to give PETA any more press. There's nothing they love more than hearing their name. And I don't want to speak it. It's like Voldemort, you know? I
simply just wanted to show the contrast, because when people look at groups that are actually saving animals, you're not just getting the lab shut down. Like, they can claim that they got this lab shut down, but they're not advocating for these dogs to be adopted out. They don't seem to really care if these dogs get euthanized. You're actually partnering with a group that is trying to go and rescue these dogs from the laboratories, in addition to getting them shut down.
Yeah. That's right. And we, under the first Trump administration, we can talk about this, on Thursday too, but under the first Trump administration, we got 4 different federal agencies to enact lab animal retirement policies, working with members of Congress. We got the NIH, the FDA, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Veterans Affairs to enact lab animal retirement policies, allowing animals, for the first time in history, there was never a policy like this before. And during Trump 45, we got 4 different federal agencies to enact such policy, and it saved dozens and dozens of animals from those laboratories. We've also been working to pass federal legislation with Congresswoman Nancy Mace since back then to standardize lab animal retirement across the entire federal government, to make sure adoption is an option for any animal in any government laboratory. And we do work with the nonprofit Kindness Ranch out in Wyoming, who, no questions asked, shows up at laboratories at all expenses paid for transport, medical care, rehabilitation, rehoming, adoption, everything. Kindness Ranch pays the bill, and they go and pick up animals at laboratories across the country, bring them back. They have a big staff that rehabilitates these dogs, cats, other animals too, make sure they're going to make good pets, and then finds loving homes for them. So there can be a great second chance and happy ending for a lot of these animals. And that's the best case scenario when we shut these labs down inside the government or other government funded labs. That's the best case scenario, that not only can we cut the funding and put the animal experimenters out of business, but also save as many animals as possible. And we've been aggressively pursuing this at NIH, at EPA, and other agencies that are talking about making cuts to their animal testing funding, that we want to be involved and can provide the resources at no expense to taxpayers to make sure these animals have loving homes, because taxpayers bought the animals and we want the government to give them back. It's as simple as that. They should have, these animals have a right to come and live with people after they've been abused by these mad scientists. It's, and I think most people support that. It's funny that you mentioned the PETA thing, and I know I said we shouldn't talk about them anymore, but because we have been investigating and tracking the NIH septic shock lab so closely, we know that the last time this laboratory had any dogs was June of last year. There aren't dogs there now, and PETA is saying, well, we're waiting to hear what's happening with the dogs there, and we're ready, we're willing and able to help. There aren't any dogs, as far as we know, in the NIH laboratory. And if they were actually involved in the investigation, they would know that. We've got the receipts. The last time the NIH bought dogs was April. The last time there was a dog in their lab was in June. And they confirmed to us in an email in January that there were no dogs there because the project was going through a new review process.
But they were planning on, but it's important to note that that they were planning on bringing 24 Beagles under the Trump administration into this lab until we made these reports go viral here on Loomer Unleashed with your, intrepid investigation. I want to move on to another article that I released on Friday. Exclusive, Trump's Department of Defense extends $10 million contract for cruel cat constipation experiments. And so this is what I was talking about earlier, and that, yeah, it's great that they have decided to shut down this laboratory where they were planning on torturing another 24 beagles under the current Trump administration. It's great that they have decided to close that laboratory, but that's one laboratory. I mean, we are funding labs here in the United States, but also abroad in China, and NIH is one agency. Another agency in our country, a department that is engaged in animal abuse, is the Department of Defense. Let's go ahead and get this article up again. Says the latest accountability failure in ending cruel and outdated animal testing comes from Trump's Department of Defense. As Laura Loomer and White Coat Waste recently reported, the DoD is still funding a Biden-era contract to test experimental drugs on 300 beagles a week in China, which is a serious threat to national security and animal welfare. Again, we talked about the threat with national security. So we released this on Friday. And then just days later, President Trump, of course, announced that they were ending gain of function. Of course, I think this has a lot to do with White Coat Waste, because White Coat Waste was the organization talking about how these animals were being used in gain of function tests. And we know that through gain of function and the horrors of the COVID lockdowns, that this is a national security threat because, of course, the COVID gain of function that took place in labs in Wuhan, China, that were funded by Fauci and the NIH and our taxpayer money, resulted in the death of 1.2 million American citizens. Let's continue. Trump's Food and Drug Administration Commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary, who opposes dog testing, just stated that this kind of animal testing for human drugs is outdated and inefficient. You can scroll down. You can see it says China there. We're not making this up. National Institute of Health. The contract end date was supposed to be May 31st, 2025. Okay, clearly says that. White Coat Waste has learned that the DoD's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency recently extended a $10 million contract to the University of Pittsburgh for inhumane experiments on cats. In these absurd DoD-funded animal tests, cats have marbles and balloons shoved into their rectums and are then electroshocked for constipation and erectile dysfunction studies. We have a video of this, actually. Perhaps we can play the video momentarily. But this cat was actually abused and killed by the United States Department of Defense. So we're going to play that momentarily. Let's continue reading the article. But really horrific stuff here. Have you heard back from anybody at the Department of Defense or NIH about this? Because I know that I sent it to the Department of Defense and I was told that they were looking into it. That's what the Department of Defense told me. I have sent it to them now 3 times on 3 separate occasions and have asked them if there's any update on whether or not this funding is being removed. I have not heard back for transparency reasons. I'm just disclosing that here publicly for everybody to know. But again, it's just another example of a lack of transparency, in my opinion, which is unacceptable from this administration.
Yeah, and at the DoD, this problem is very easily to isolate and eliminate. There are about a dozen dog and cat labs, at least according to the DoD in a letter they sent to Congress last year to Congresswoman Young Kim from California. They indicated that there was about a dozen dog and cat labs that they were funding. Some of those have timed out, so they're not being funded anymore. But we know the cat constipation experiments just got renewed for another year. We know that the contract for torturing 300 beagles a week in China is still active and set to run at least through the end of the month, maybe longer. So Secretary Pete, if you're listening, it looks like we have 3 weeks. We could save 900 beagles if you cut the contract early. We'd love to see that. But it's an easy problem to isolate and eliminate at the DoD versus the NIH, which is funding 1,500 labs around the world. Much more complicated there. It's not an excuse. It's just the reality that the DoD can really easily do something. Actually, the DoD since the 80s has had a policy that prohibits some dog and cat experimentation, but not all of it. There's a loophole that allows them to be used in these type of experiments. So all they have to do is cut the funding for a dozen projects, close this loophole, and the DoD can make history by eliminating the use of dogs and cats completely. It's something we already did at the Department of Veterans Affairs under the first Trump administration. We ended all dog and cat testing at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And now these other agencies need to follow suit. The sky didn't fall. We saved a lot of animals. We saved a lot of tax dollars on unnecessary and wasteful experiments. This is an easy problem for the DoD to fix that will gain them so much love from the public and the press. People across the political spectrum are going to be happy about this.
Right.
No one wants to see cats tortured by having balloons and marbles shoved up their butts and being electroshocked, or puppies being poisoned in drug tests, both in the United States and China. But that's what's happening on Trump's watch right now. And I am
and especially right now with our trade war with
happening.
China, especially with the tariff wars right now with China, you would think that the Trump administration would be all about cutting funding for these laboratories in China. But this is an example of what I mean about semantics, right? And manipulation and gaslighting. We were told that the Beagle labs were being shut down. A lot of people are going to think, oh, great, that means that no more Beagles are going to be tortured by the United States of America. When in reality, we're actually sending over 300 Beagles to China, where in Chinese laboratories, they're actually going to be abusing these animals in experiments paid for by our taxpayer dollars, funded by the NIH. And so the NIH can do this victory lap all they want in the Oval Office and on Fox News, but it's quite dishonest given the fact that, as we just showed through these receipts that you uncovered, and you can see these all on loomered.com in that article that's up on my website. The extension date was clearly extended by another year into the Trump administration. It's supposed to expire this month. It's being extended. I want to go ahead and play this video, Justin, because so many people are probably like, oh my God, this has to be fake. Shoving balloons and shoving marbles up cats' buttholes, right? And you're saying balloons, but from my understanding, it was actually condoms in some instances too. So balloons, condoms, and marbles. So really sick, twisted experiments being conducted on innocent animals by the Department of Defense. I don't really understand how shoving a condom up a cat's butthole is going to improve our defense here in the United States of America. But I'm going to play the video that was compiled by White Coat Waste. It is disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. This is a video of a cat being tortured, but it's real, and people need to know what's happening. Really sick. I honestly am just so, it's so disturbing. I can't even wrap my head around why an experiment like that would be needed. I just don't understand what the purpose of that. I mean, they say trust the science. I am just really failing to understand, and I think a lot of people in the comments too are failing to understand what we benefit from shoving marbles and condoms up a cat's butthole.
Well, this is the frustrating part about this. I mean, there's a lot of things obviously that are aggravating and frustrating and outright angering about the situation, including these experiments. Secretary Kennedy, Marty Makary, the FDA commissioner, Dr. Makary, Jay Bhattacharya at NIH, and obviously the three of those guys who run the public health agencies have vocally, and we've talked about this, supported White Coat, but also are on the record opposing dog and cat experiments. So this should be a very easy lift for them. They've been talking the talk for years, saying that this stuff is wasteful and unnecessary. It needs to stop. But it hasn't happened yet. It seems like it'd be a day one thing. Like, what's more American than saving cats and dogs from government abuse? That's like, the best news for liberty lovers, animal lovers everywhere. Would love to hear. Pet owners would love to hear that the government wasn't going to torture or pay for the torture of dogs and cats in laboratories anymore. Yet that's what's happening. I can't imagine that President Trump knows that this is still going on, because he is going to go down in history rightfully so, as the president who did more to end animal testing than any other. And you'd think that he would want this to be ended, and that he would, if as soon as he knows about it, I would imagine he will direct the people who work for him to take swift and decisive action to do something. Because unfortunately, they haven't done it on their own yet. And we're how many months in now to the new administration? And these are first not if they're not day one, they're first 100 days items. And that was part of our plan that we rolled out with Roger Stone, whose show I was on the other day, and he said very nice things about you, Laura. And I've been talking to him and other people, and we were pressuring the Trump administration very early on to prioritize cutting dog and cat labs. It was number one on our priority list.
Wait, you said Roger said not very nice things about me on the show?
No, he said very nice things about you.
Oh, it's hard to tell with Roger because, one day he loves me and then the next day it's like, I love Roger. I mean, he's one of my best friends and a mentor to me, but depending on what side of the bed he wakes up on, one day he loves what I'm doing and then the next day I'm a disappointment to him. So it's
no, I did this radio show the other day and he said he was a big fan, and we've been working with him since 2016. He helped us get Trump to end the USDA's largest cat lab, the largest cat lab in the government.
Roger
helped us get Trump to shut down.
He's a big animal advocate.
Yeah, and
he's got a lot of animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been talking, for months in preparation for the new administration. What do we want to prioritize? Number one was cutting dog and cat labs. Number two is cutting labs in China. And neither of those things has been done yet. Yet PETA and other organizations they're literally sending out press releases saying they're popping champagne over a press release that Jay Bhattacharya put out that doesn't promise to cut any animal testing. So they're getting away with, the agencies are getting away with murder and getting all this praise from these organizations who have their standards are set so low that they're willing to accept that. But we know that's not what the president wants. That's not what the administration promised. So we want them to do better. We want them to keep their promises and cut wasteful spending and clean up the NIH. My God, removing Fauci's fingerprints from the government should be priority number one for everybody in the public health agencies, everybody at HHS. I think Secretary Kennedy feels strongly about that, but I'm not sure about anyone else.
Yeah, and look, the buck stops with Donald Trump. But I will say, I don't think that Donald Trump is even aware of all of this stuff. It's up to his agency heads to be monitoring all of this. And the fact that they're not bringing this information to him is alarming because obviously Donald Trump does not support animal abuse. He made it a big point of his first administration to make animal cruelty a federal felony in 2019. And even back then, PETA was falsely accusing Donald Trump of not doing anything to end animal cruelty. And all of these leftist organizations were saying that Donald Trump, doesn't care about the environment. He doesn't care about, animals. He doesn't care about stuff like that. When in reality, President Trump has done a lot. I'd say that he's done more than any other president to really raise awareness about animal rights issues. He spoke out about all of the whales that were going crazy from the windmills, right? When he was on Joe Rogan, and everybody was laughing when he said he wanted to be a whale psychiatrist, right? But people were like, oh, wow, I had no idea that this is a problem with the mistreatment of whales. And he brought attention to animal cruelty when his administration made animal cruelty a felony. Now he's shutting down these Beagle labs. So Donald Trump is a man of action. He just has to have the information given to him. And it's, when people gatekeep or when they, Jay Bhattacharya was aware of these Beagle labs. I will just say, I know through conversations that many people had with Jay Bhattacharya that he was made aware of these extending contract dates long before he ever went on Fox News and, said that they were shutting it down. And so he could have shut it down, but he made the choice not to. And he was aware of this for a very long time. And so I find it to be really suspicious that it wasn't until it went viral on social media and Elon Musk had to get involved that they finally were like, okay, we're going to shut these labs down. It's horrific. Well, if you really thought it was so horrific, how come you didn't shut it down when we told you about it months ago?
Yeah, Laura, every day that there's inaction, puppies and kittens are dying,
animals
they're suffering, and we're wasting a lot of money. That's what's happening. And I've had speaking to the issue of Trump being great on animal issues and animal testing issues, the first time we knew that and saw that in our work was April 2020 when we exposed the Wuhan lab funding almost exactly 5 years ago, a couple days after we broke that story with Matt Gaetz, Trump was on TV saying he's going to cut it. And he did. Fast forward 5 years, earlier this year, we did our big expose on creating transgender lab animals and torturing them in experiments. $250 million wasted by NIH, the Department of Veterans Affairs, National Science Foundation, creating transgender lab animals. We broke that story. I testified in a House Oversight Committee hearing about it. It got to the president's desk, and during his congressional address, his State of the Union, he called it out as government waste that he was going to cut. And 2 days later, he was talking about it again on Fox with Maria Bartiromo, talking about these crazy animal experiments that are creating transgender animals that need to be cut. I am confident that if he heard about cat constipation experiments, he'd be out there talking about the tremendous waste and abuse at the NIH that people like Fauci.
But even after President Trump spoke out about the transgender mice experiments, somebody in the NIH, as we reported here on Loomer Unleashed, and there's an article about this on my website. We'll get it pulled up right now. But I put an article out about this, about how the NIH renewed funding for cruel Fauci, Beagle, and trans mice experiments under the new Trump administration. So, they quietly renewed the funding for these trans mice experiments, and they extended it for another year, just like they did with these Beagle torture experiments. And so again, it's like sabotage of Trump's administration from people within his administration. Donald Trump doesn't want there to be transgender mice experiments, but clearly, as you can see from this exclusive report we put out on April 22nd, let's scroll down with the receipts uncovered by White Coat Waste. You can see here, scroll down some more. We have all the documentation. More documents. We have the documents. Here we go. Okay, so that was the same article as before. Scroll down. And keep scrolling down. Posted it
maybe
earlier.
we have the receipts here.
We put it in the article. Let's see. Scroll up a bit. I think I tweeted it. I think that's what I did, is I may have tweeted it.
Oh, yeah, you may have tweeted it.
I think I tweeted it, but it was in the article too. I know. It was tweeted on April 22nd, a long time ago. You could type in transgender mice, Laura Loomer, and probably find it. Anyway, I can describe it, and you can too. We broke this story, and this was on April 22nd. So President Trump gives his address weeks prior to this, of course, and they're renewing, like secretly and quietly, trying to renew. Here we go. Here we have it right here. The budget expiration date was supposed to be June of 2025. Okay, this was for a project at the University of Indiana. And then if you scroll down, right, and you can see the graphic, if you zoom out of the graphic so everybody can see it on the full screen, it says revised budget date. And then the budget date then says June 30th of 2026. So again, it was supposed to end in a month, and now they're renewing it. And this is through the NIH. You can see from the NIH database there, we had this little graphic put together. So who within the NIH is sabotaging President Trump's agenda? Doge identified this wasteful spending. You identified this wasteful spending. President Trump brings it to everyone's attention. People mock it. You had Bill Maher on TV trying to say that it was fake news. All these leftist reporters at CNN trying to say that it wasn't real. Then they were forced to issue a retraction on CNN and say, oh, actually, they were doing transgender mice experiments. And now they're quietly renewing it. So we didn't hear anything about them ending the mice experiments in this Oval Office meeting that they had. We didn't hear anything about them ending it when Dr. Jay Bhattacharya said they were shutting down the Beagle lab. So it looks like we're still going to be getting transgender mice experiments and experiments on beagles in laboratories in China funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars. And we're still going to be shoving marbles and condoms up cats' buttholes for the Department of Defense.
Well, hopefully that's not the case. And hopefully, again, you'll work your magic and the right people are listening and watching this and are going to wake up tomorrow and do something about it. But yeah, to the Trump administration, to Doge's credit and the Trump administration's credit, they cut 10 of the grants that we uncovered that were funding transgender animal experiments, but they didn't cut all of them. There were 2 that we were sure had not been cut. One just expired naturally, just the course of the grant at Duke University, and that one's over. At least unless it gets renewed. And then this other one at Indiana University, these were the last 2. And we kept telling the NIH that the White House highlighted these grants in its press release in March saying, here's the wasteful transgender animal experiments we need to cut. And they cut most of them, but there were still 2 that were in the White House press release and press statement that had not been cut. And if you go on the NIH website today, right now, this morning, I was on it, the grant to Indiana University still shows as active and funded through 2026. And I pointed this out to the NIH and they said, oh yeah, well, we're going to take care of it. But it's still up. You could look for yourself. We have the receipts. It's still showing as active on the NIH website and funded through 2026. Same with a lot of these experiments that we've heard, people have told us in the administration or at NIH, oh, we're going to get on that. We're taking care of that. Well, put your money where your mouth is. People would love to hear that you cut animal abuse. It's not something to keep a secret. It's something you put out a press release about and tweet about and go tell the president about so he can take a victory lap. But that doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah, and
Jay
it's such an
Bhattacharya's
easy
mention
win,
of cutting
too.
the dog lab was like an afterthought.
Yeah, it's such an easy win. I mean, you would think that they'd be all over this in terms of, oh, Mr. President, we can bring some beagles to the Oval Office and you can take a photo with a beagle and everyone will you're doing the right thing, but also the optics of it are just amazing for the president. I mean, how is the left going to find something to be angry about saving animals? I'm sure they probably would, right? But the optics are so good, and it's also saving the American people money. But most importantly, you're sticking up for innocent animals who can't defend themselves. And so it's crazy to think that there are actually people in the administration who are maliciously gatekeeping this information from Donald Trump and also trying to undermine his public statements I think that they're trying to do this on purpose to embarrass the president of the United States, because why else would you quietly extend a contract for transgender mice experiments after the president said that he doesn't want it anymore?
Or promote a gain-of-function lunatic at the NIH who worked with Fauci and was involved in digging up a dead body to harvest a virus for gain-of-function experiments. I mean, this is just lunacy. This is something you'd expect under, Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci at the NIH under Joe Biden, not under the Trump administration that promised us a clean slate over at agencies like the NIH. So, yeah, I can't imagine that this has made its way to the president. And honestly, I think there's definitely some bad actors and malicious activity going on. But I also just think people don't have their priorities straight. You see these agencies, putting out statements, putting out press releases, things that people just don't care about, that are not important, that are not going to get people fired up to, rally around what's happening.
Well, they also spend a lot of time
people are
memeing.
disappointed. People are disappointed.
And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here at all. I think memes are good, but it seems like there's a lot of people in the White House press team that have a lot of time on their hands to be making all types of memes and graphics. And there seems to be a lot of gatekeeping with people that are emailing the press team trying to get this information to the president. And so maybe some of the interns in the White House should spend less time memeing and they should spend more time actually relaying information to the press secretary and the president of the United States. I mean, look, I'm not trying to sound bitchy when I say this, but every single day there's like another Zoomer like tweet from the White House social media account, and they have an awful amount of time to be memeing and making all types of graphics and meme like tweets. But people like yourself and people like me are sending the press team all of these very important reports that could be benefiting the administration, showing how the Trump administration's agenda is being undermined. And I don't know, it's like you have a lot of children that seem to be working. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it does seem like there are some very immature people, perhaps in these intern positions, that, spend their time more focused on social media as opposed to actually like getting press reports to the president of the United States. Because, I mean, God only knows how many emails you've sent over and how many reports you've sent over to the White House. And I hope you don't mind sharing this, but have your messages even been replied to?
Some of them. I've sent, I think, over $1.5 billion in line itemed animal tests that are being funded by NIH and DOD that could be cut overnight. Most of those are still active. Virtually all of them are still active. And listen, our job as a watchdog organization, your job as a journalist, is to hold the government accountable. Whether there's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House or in Congress, our job is to hold them accountable and promote whatever our mission is. The first Trump administration, we beat up on the USDA, we beat up on the VA for torturing dogs and cats until they did the right thing, and eventually they came around. FDA eventually came around. These agencies were on the wrong side of the issue, and we launched effective campaigns, grassroots advocacy campaigns, press campaigns, working with people like Roger Stone, to show the government that, listen, you're screwing up badly. You're not promoting the president's agenda, which is to cut wasteful spending and be kind to animals when possible. And obviously that was something that Trump has taken seriously. So we held them accountable, and we got good outcomes. We shut down the largest cat lab in the entire government at the USDA, and dozens of cats got released to loving homes. 2 of them went to live with our president and founder, Delilah and Petite. We shut down FDA's nicotine experiments. They retired a couple dozen monkeys to a sanctuary in Florida, where they're still living. We ended dog and cat testing at the VA. And those things didn't happen overnight. The agencies had to be pulled kicking and screaming. And again, we are a nonpartisan advocacy group. So we are against wasteful government spending that funds animal abuse. So the first Trump administration started off on the wrong foot, but ended up in the right place and ended up making history. Like I said, Trump will go down in history for the decisions that were made at that time. But it didn't come without a lot of agitation from outside of people holding the government accountable. Same under Biden, except they undid a lot of the progress that Trump made. And a lot of our fights with them were trying to preserve the progress we made under the Trump administration and preserve the cuts, preserve the phase out plans and timelines to get rid of animal testing. And they reversed a lot of that. So a lot of the work then was holding them accountable to simply preserve protections, progress we made with Trump. And here we are again, thinking we'll pick up where we left off with Trump. We're going to keep the momentum going. And in some cases that's been true. But in the bigger picture, I think a lot more could have been done in the first 100 days to make way and clear the deck to do other things, instead of you and me being here 100+ days in talking about how they're still funding and torturing cats and dogs in experiments in the US and China. I mean, we shouldn't still be talking about this. We should all be celebrating that it's over and that Trump did it, and we can move on to the next thing. But we're still talking about this, and that's very surprising to me.
Yeah. And look, I'm grateful for what Trump is doing, but at the same time, I want people to know that just because they had all these media stations covering, the shutdown of this one Beagle lab doesn't mean that it's ended. We just gave you multiple examples here live on Loomer Unleashed of different experiments involving animals that are being funded by taxpayer money through the NIH and also the Department of Defense abroad, also here in the United States, but also in China abroad. So it's concerning, and we have to keep up the fight. And that's the thing, is that it doesn't matter whether I have a press pass or not. I'm still going to be breaking these stories, and I'm still going to find a way to get these reports to the president of the United States and people in the administration who need to know this information. And so where can people go to support the work that you're doing? Because it's really incredible. And if you're an animal lover and you want to see your taxpayer money stop being used to torture and abuse innocent animals, I think that you should go on over to White Coat Waste website right now and make a donation to them, because this is really incredible work that they're doing. And I know what it's like to have your hard work stolen from you and taken from you, and to not get credit when other people are trying to pretend like they're responsible for your work. And it's one of the worst things ever, because you want to be able to celebrate the victories. Not for your ego, but because you work hard and you spend a lot of time and you spend a lot of money doing these investigations. So where do people go to support your work over at White Coat Waste, Justin?
So thanks for all the kind words, Laura, and we couldn't be scoring these big wins without you. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your support. Whitecoatwaste.org is our website, and at White Coat Waste on all social media platforms. Go there, follow the work we're doing, sign up for our mailing list on our website so you get updates. We just sent out a bunch of emails about the history of our NIH dog testing campaign and how we got to ending this Beagle lab. We send out action alerts where you send emails directly into the White House or to federal agencies. We have one up right now asking people to write Dr. Jay Bhattacharya at NIH and urging him to defund all dog and cat testing immediately. So we'd love for you to join our grassroots army, donate if you can. But yeah, this is a pivotal moment here. We have an administration and a president who actually is serious about cutting wasteful spending at the NIH. That's never been done before. The NIH is the single largest abuser of animals in laboratories in the world, and Trump can do something about it. We just need some pressure on his leadership at the NIH to get them to do the right thing. So whitecoatwaste.org, at whitecoatwaste. Tell your friends, share, like, repost, do all that stuff, and spread the word.
Absolutely. And where do people go to follow you and White Coat Waste on social media so that they can see all of these exciting updates and reports?
Yeah, if you want to follow me talking shit on X, at Justin R. Goodman. And again, our official account is at White Coat Waste.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, we're talking shit. We're shit posting for a cause. You know, we're actually saving animals with our shit talking. So it's good shit talking. Well, Justin,
That's right.
Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Again, fantastic work. And if people want to read these exclusive reports, this exclusive report that, I just broke on my website in conjunction with White Coat Waste, you can go to loomered.com, and you can see the watermarked FOIA requests from White Coat Waste yourself. And look, the receipts don't lie. You can clearly see that they had every intention 2 weeks ago of extending these Beagle experiments at the same NIH lab under the Trump administration that they are saying they just shut down. So it's important that people know how this all happened, and it couldn't have been done without you, Justin. So thanks for everything that you do to support our furry friends.
Thank you, Laura. And thanks to Elon. If he's listening, we know you helped get this on the radar of the administration and get it shut down. So
thank you, Elon
Thanks
Musk, because I truly believe that this only got shut down because Elon probably, I have no evidence of this, but I think that given the screenshots and the time of events, I think Elon probably was like, what the hell's going on? Shut this down.
Yeah, me too. So thank you all. Thanks everyone listening and watching for your support. And yeah, join the fight with us.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks, Laura.
Well, as I said, on Thursday's episode of Loomer Unleashed, we're going to have a very exciting, heartwarming, emotional, exclusive video release. So stay tuned for that, a continuation of our work here on Loomer Unleashed to help save and rescue these beagles and to promote and expose these cruel investigations or experiments and the very heroic investigations, these very cruel animal experiments and the heroic investigations into these experiments that are being exposed by White Coat Waste. So stay tuned for Thursday's episode. Before we continue tonight, there's a lot to talk about, of course, as it relates to these Epstein files and this wild statement made by Congressman James Comer today that he thinks the Epstein files may have actually been shredded or burned. I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed, and that is Kirk Elliott Precious Metals.
Breaking news. Laura Loomer has been canceled. The President of the United States has refused to take her phone calls as he suspects she is soon to be arrested.
Is Laura Loomer the most hated person on planet Earth? We want to hear from you, the listener, and get your opinion on whether or not...
Man, I tell you, I heard she got canceled. We coming for you, bitch. We coming to your house, Laura Loomer. We fight. We know where you live. We coming for you right now. We coming for your friends. We coming for your friend's little dog.
Frankly, I hope they throw her away for the rest of her life. I hope she dies.
She is currently on the run from authorities. She is described as armed and dangerous.
I just can't believe she's been getting away with it for this. An angry mob appears to be forming outside the home of journalist Laura Loomer.
What is wrong with you? Why are you not panicking?
Because I called Kirk Elliott Precious Metals, and I learned how adding gold and silver to my portfolio is one of the safest ways to not just grow my finances, but to also protect them from the uncertainty of the future. So I'm fine.
Call economist Kirk Elliott at 720-605-3900 or schedule a call online at kepm.com/Loomer to learn how you can safely grow your retirement portfolio with precious metals.
Head on over to Kirk Elliott Precious Metals. The website is kepm.com/Loomer. That's kepm.com/Loomer. Call Kirk Elliott anytime this week. His team of experts is always available to take your calls and answer your questions about how you can diversify your portfolio and protect your assets and protect your future financial wealth by investing in precious metals. Gold is at record high right now, so it's a great time to be investing in precious metals because the price just keeps going up and up and up. So again, kepm.com/Loomer. KEPM.com/Loomer, or call 720-605-3900, 720-605-3900, and let them know that Laura Loomer sent you. All righty, moving on now. This was crazy. Everybody's been wondering where the Epstein files are. And go ahead and put your comments in the chat, because I know that a lot of people are going to have comments about this tonight. And if you have any comments or questions about all this animal testing that we discussed, we're going to be heading on over to the comments section momentarily. But I want to play this clip for you. This clip is crazy. This came out today. This was an interview with Benny Johnson on the Benny Johnson Show and Congressman James Comer, who's on the House Oversight Committee. And Benny Johnson, it's a little bit of a long clip, but you should watch it. It's mind-blowing. Benny Johnson was asking James Comer about the Epstein files and whether or not we could expect to see the Epstein files come out. And, you know, usually you hear all these canned responses from politicians that just go ahead and defend Pam Bondi, right? And they say, oh, you know, Pam Blondy's doing such a great job. You know, it's like, you know, all this fucking circle jerk bullshit. You know, oh, yeah, she's so amazing. Oh, my God, she's so great. Blah, 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 right? Yeah, she's not so great. Trust me, guys. She's not really doing such a great job. We were promised that these files were going to be released on day one. Day one promise. Well, what is it now? Over 100 days into the Trump administration, have we seen any Epstein files? No, we haven't received any Epstein files. Then she goes on Fox News. I mean, honestly, every single day, Pam Bondi is on Fox News. She's on Fox News more than she does her job. And other people are starting to realize it. We have a video clip, and we'll play this after the fact, right? Or maybe we should play this video clip before we play the Comer clip so that you can see all the different statements that have been made by Pam Bondi. I made this video clip compilation probably like 2 months or so ago to highlight all of the discrepancies in Pam Bondi's statements. First, she said that the files were on her desk, right? And then she had that ridiculous Bindergate situation at the White House where she made all these crazy binders that were not even full of Epstein documents and had these influencers essentially run a state media campaign for her where they waved these binders around pretending like they were given Epstein files by Pam Bondi. Well, it turns out there's really nothing in the binder. Then she goes on Fox News and says, oh, the files are on my desk right now. Then she tells Mark Levin that the files are being delivered to my office in a truck. So they were on her desk, but then they weren't on her desk. And then they were delivered to her office in a truck. And then the big bad boogeymen over at the deep state were trying to sabotage her, and they lied to her about the real Epstein documents. And then they were going to be released at a later date. But now, right, we don't know, because Pam Bondi also came out this last week and said that there's no set deadline for when they're going to release the Epstein files, even though we were told she already released the Epstein files. Remember when she gave out these binders, right? Bindergate. How could we forget Bindergate? So look, I think we need to just have a come to Jesus moment here and realize and admit that Pam Bondi is a liar, right? She is a full-fledged liar. She has, in my opinion, little to no credibility as a result of her lies about one of the most high-profile criminal cases ever, the Jeffrey Epstein sex scandal, human trafficking scandal, sex crime, pedophilia scandal, something that has captivated the attention of people not just here in the United States, but all around the world. And she has royally dropped the ball and screwed the pooch on this. So let's go ahead and just show you this compilation of Pam Bondi's previous statements on the Epstein files, and then we're going to show you what James Comer said today, and then you can come to the conclusion. Maybe you're going to come to the same conclusion that I've come to, that Pam Bondi is a liar, and we can't trust Pam Bondi anymore. Let's play the clip.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
And of course, you've seen the very strong letter. We will get everything. We will have it in our possession. We will redact it, of course, to protect grand jury information and confidential witnesses, but the American people have a right to know. And Donald Trump is the most transparent president in our nation's history. So not only will America get the full Epstein files, they will get JFK, they will get Martin Luther King.
I don't think we have any of those files right now. Here's another promise from Pam Blondie on Maria Bartiromo. Let's go ahead and play clip number 20. And then
the MAGA group is mad that they don't know more about the Epstein files. The MAGA group is mad that they don't know more about the January 6th investigation. Are you going to give us any more information on these two issues?
Sure. And first to the Epstein, I'm mad that I didn't have more information on Epstein. I was given 200 pages of documents. I've asked Director Patel. He came in after that, of course. I'd asked for those documents prior to Cash coming in. Cash is going to get me all the information. I've asked him to find out why I didn't receive all those documents and he didn't receive all those documents. We've now found out, of course, that they were in New York. We've received truckload of documents of evidence, and Cash is going to give me a deadline on when he can go through that to protect, of course, the victims of sex trafficking who are wrapped into this. And he's going to give me a deadline on when he can get this, and we will get out as much as we can, as fast as we can, to the American people, because they deserve to know. Same with January 6th. We're all working on JFK right now. We will be working on Martin Luther King. All of these things that the president promised, we will be doing. They can try to hide documents from us, but they can't. It might take a little longer. We will find them and we will release them to the American people because it's transparency.
I don't even think we got all the JFK files. I don't even think we got all the MLK files. We certainly did not get any of the Epstein files. So, the files are on my desk. The files are going to be released. Here's the files at the White House with this, Findergate, social media influencers. I'm so angry that the FBI lied to me and said that they gave me the files because I don't know how to proofread, and I decided to put together a bunch of binders without even looking to see what was inside the information that the FBI gave to me. I mean, it's just lie after lie after lie. And look, I said on the show months ago, we're not getting the Epstein files. Okay. I told you all months ago, don't expect these Epstein files because we're not going to get them. Either they're video files, I said, because they're child pornography, or the physical files have been destroyed. That clip is on social media. I said that months ago. And now James Comer, who, he's a bit of a blowhard himself. I mean, this is a guy that wrote a book about the Biden crime family saying that he was going to impeach Joe Biden. Where the hell did that investigation go? He spent more time writing book chapters than writing subpoenas, right? That's a fact. We have a book from James Comer about the Biden crime family, but we don't have an impeachment of the Biden crime family or Joe Biden. So, James Comer is all about, fake investigations and talking a big talk and making false promises to the GOP. But hey, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And I want you to take a listen to what James Comer said today on Benny Johnson, because this is the truth. This is probably what really happened. There are no more Epstein files because they have probably been destroyed. Take a listen to what James Comer, a member of Congress, had to say today.
This program, just for the sake of transparency, which is very big for you. And so in closing, any motion on that, any movement on that? We hear that there's a timeline now.
I hope James has the Epstein files, because I don't think the Department of Justice has them, or at least the Attorney General does not have them, or she would have turned them over. The president ordered them released. The Attorney General ordered them released. We all know they have not been released. And one of my biggest fears that I had, and I expressed this with Kash Patel and a lot of people, Stephen Miller, and a lot of people going into the new administration. I'm like, I hope they're not shredding documents right now. This was a few weeks before the transition. I said, I hope they're not shredding documents, but you all need to go on that first day and try to get all this stuff released, because my fear is from what I've dealt with in investigations and in communication with this deep state apparatus, is they're probably in there shredding documents as we speak. So hopefully someone has a copy of that, and you know, I hope we find out, because our task force has done everything, led by Anna Paulina Luna. You had her on your show many times. I mean, she's relentless. She's persistent. She's pretty frustrated right now that these files haven't been released, even though the president and the attorney general have ordered them released. But you know, it's like I told Anna the same thing I told Patel and everybody else. I'm like, you assume that somebody in the deep state said, okay, we'll just put these in a file back here, this incriminating evidence on everybody, and maybe the next administration can do whatever they want to do with it. That's unfortunately the way it's supposed to work, but it hasn't worked with this deep state.
So they're just going to let the incriminating evidence sit there smoldering that could put them all in prison.
Yeah,
right?
no, I wish they should. That's what they're supposed to do. But you know, you and I have dealt with them, Benny. You've covered the deep state as well as anyone. I mean, they cover their tracks, and it's just hard for me to believe they're going to leave incriminating evidence if the government was involved. If the government wasn't involved, I don't think they would have any reason to protect Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton. They're never going to be elected anything again. I don't think they would have any reason to protect Bill Gates or anybody else. The concern I've always had about the Epstein file was the government involved. Did the government know? Was the government using Epstein and the videos to blackmail the most influential people around the world? If that's the case, then they knew there were victims of sex crimes there, and they did nothing. So you know, that's the concern I have. If the government covers this up, I don't believe it's because of any love affair or affection for the Clinton family, just like I never believed they were hiding and covering for the Bidens because they loved Joe Biden. It was because they hated Donald Trump, you know, and they didn't want their agencies to be disrupted. The same thing with the Epstein files. I don't know this, but my concern is that that the government may have known a lot more and may have been an active participant, maybe with the intentions of intelligence gathering. Who knows? But at the end of the day, I don't think the American people would be okay if the government knew that crimes against young women were occurring, and yet they did nothing to intervene.
So you heard it there. He said if Pam Bondi was going to release these files, she would have already done so if she had them. And then he went on to say that, shockingly, that he thinks that the files have been destroyed, that they have either been shredded or incinerated. Those are some pretty shocking statements from a United States member of Congress. So again, look, a broken clock is right twice a day. He's not my favorite, but look, at the end of the day, he's right. If Pam Bondi had these documents, she would have probably already released these documents, and she has not released the documents. So, you know, it's crazy. Totally crazy. Pam Bondi is going to have to respond to this, because these are pretty charged accusations and pretty charged inflammatory comments made by a member of Congress, the head of Oversight Committee in Congress, suggesting that Pam Bondi is lying about having these files and that the files don't exist anymore because they have all been destroyed. I think everybody needs to be very concerned about this. But we're not going to hear about this from the Trump administration, I bet, because it's a bit of a black eye after Bindergate. Shut that down really fast, didn't they? But hey, we're not allowed to talk about that. Let's see. There's so much to talk about. The Democrats, of course, are experiencing record low approval rating. And as a result, they have continued their trend of inciting violence. And we have some clips in case you missed them this week. Ilhan Omar, in a video interview with Mehdi Hassan, who he's a radical Muslim. He was fired, I believe, from MSNBC because of his, allegedly fired because of his radical Muslim sentiments, especially his radical comments in the aftermath of October 7th. Here's a interview with Ilhan Omar that's been going viral. It even prompted a response from Vice President J.D. Vance the other day, in which she said that We shouldn't be worried about the threat of jihadists and Islamic terror, but instead, governments should be profiling white men, and they should actually be putting white men in databases because white men, she says, are the biggest terror threat in our country. Let's go ahead and play this clip. Shocking.
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. We should be profiling, monitoring, and creating policies to fight the radicalization of white men.
Absolutely insane. I believe we have JD Vance's tweet from this week in which he said that her language is genocidal. Let's go ahead and get that up. We have that tweet. He said, this isn't just sick, it's actually genocidal language. What a disgrace this person is. But hey, the Democrats think that this kind of language is going to win them the midterms, and they think that they are going to have success telling white men that they're the biggest terror threat in our country. I believe we also have a clip of Jasmine Crockett saying that we need to throw a chair at our haters. We have that clip. Let's go ahead and get that clip pulled up. Jasmine Crockett seems to be in the news every single week because she is making very derogatory and violent comments towards Republicans. She made a comment the other day while she was speaking at I think she was a commencement speaker. I mean, it's quite shocking that she's giving this type of talk at a commencement speech. And you can see that Benny Thompson is sitting behind her. Of course, he was one of the main members of the J6 committee, sitting right behind her there while she gives that talk. But Jasmine Crockett talking about how you need to use a chair to physically throw at your Republican haters. I mean, this is incitement to violence. Let's go ahead and play the clip.
There are going to be people that tell you that you don't belong. And I am here to tell you over and over and over that you absolutely belong. There are people that are going to tell you that there is not a table in which there is a seat for you. But I am here to remind you of Montgomery and those folding chairs. Let me tell you that we know how to use a chair, whether we pulling it up or we doing something else with it. Let me be the first one to tell you that I know that y'all are ready to put your boots on the ground. That's your cue. There we go. Hey.
You ready? Where them fans at? Where them fans?
Just so ghetto. I just can't believe that she's an actual member of Congress. So today, Loomer Unleashed, DC contributor Charles Downs actually caught up with congressional Democrats as they were walking around the Hill. And we decided to confront them and talk to them and ask them about these comments and remarks made by Ilhan Omar and Jasmine Crockett. And Charles actually caught up with Democrat Congressman Dan Goldman, who, if you recall, if you're a longtime viewer of Loomer Unleashed, you know we've covered him extensively here. He is a client of Lauren Mershon. Of course, that's the daughter of Judge Juan Mershon, her political consulting company. And we asked him, do you agree with your colleague Jasmine Crockett's comments that called for the incitement of violence against Republicans and physical assault against Republicans with a chair? And take a listen to what the congressman from New York had to say.
Congressman Goldman, do you agree with your colleague Jasmine Crockett's incitement of violence that Democrats should use a chair to attack their Republican haters?
It's not inciting violence.
So saying to use a chair to attack haters isn't inciting violence?
Can you should go pay attention to what happened on January 6th if you want to learn the definition of inciting violence.
So you're okay with, remember, your, I guess, colleagues saying, hey, use a chair against Republican haters? All right. I was just being clear, Congressman.
No, you've been clear both times.
Thank you.
Congressman, it's
Congress
He refused to condemn the violence, but then he took it a step further and said, oh, if you really want to talk about violence, let's talk about what happened on January 6th. I mean, what is he talking about? Is he talking about a black Democrat police officer murdering Ashley Babbitt? Because that's the only violence I saw on January 6th. Of course, Democrats don't want to talk about that. Even though the federal government this last week, it was announced, was forced to come to a settlement agreement with Ashley Babbitt's family. So that was some good news. Every single day, the Democrats continue to grow more radical and more violent in their rhetoric. You've probably been following all of the protest coverage that we've done here at Loomer Unleashed over the last few weeks, and we have documented the Tesla takedown events where they have Luigi Mangione wannabes. They have been bringing illegal aliens to their rallies. We have also documented members of Antifa who we've engaged in conversation. All you have to do is just go to Loomer Unleashed on X and my X account. Every single weekend, we're covering all these violent protests. Every single week, we're covering the violent protests where you have people in support of these radical violent movements protesting against Donald Trump, protesting against Elon Musk in Washington, D.C. And you have many congressional Democrats who are speaking at their rallies. Just the other day, let's go ahead and play these two clips too. We actually caught Maxwell Frost and we caught Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii attending one of these protests where they were actually inciting violence against President Donald Trump. It was a May Day protest. It was a May Day protest the other day for May 1st. And, you know, Loomer Unleashed was one of the only outlets on the ground to document all these protests. You had bust-in protesters by the Democrat Party, illegal aliens who were bussed in to protest President Trump's deportation orders. And you had Maxwell Frost there advocating in support of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And you had Democrat Senator Mazie Hirono, who, you know, looked like an elderly patient needing assistance to walk. Let's go ahead and get these videos pulled up. And I think this is the Mazie Hirono clip. But it shows you we need term limits. First of all, if you're a member of Congress and you need to be physically guided to get to your location, first of all, that's a major red flag. Secondly, if you're hanging out with 501c3 nonprofit organizations that are acting in a partisan nature and advocating for illegal aliens, well, then those 501c3s should probably be stripped of their 501c3 tax deductible status. That's another thing. Like, who in the Trump administration is giving the president advice? Because that seems like a no-brainer to shutting down these radical movements. All these groups that are protesting in Washington, D.C. are 501c3 charities. So again, I was told only geniuses work for Donald Trump. I was told that Donald Trump only hires the best people. So I just hope that some of these geniuses are able to figure this out themselves. Let's go ahead and play the clip.
Congressman Frost. Hey, how's it going? Let me talk to him. I know, right? Hey, why are congressional Democrats obsessed with embracing policy that frees MS-13 gang members and brings them back to America?
I'm obsessed with the Constitution.
But do you not disagree that he was an MS-13 gang member, Congressman? That's literally what the facts say, right?
Hi, Congressman.
He says he's obsessed with the Constitution. Well, not really, because if you were obsessed with the Constitution, you'd be obsessed with law and order, and it's a crime for illegal aliens to enter our country illegally. So no, don't try to say that you're obsessed with the Constitution when you don't give a damn about law and order in our country. Let's go ahead and play this clip of Senator Mazie Hirono. Again, these are Democrat lawmakers, right? Maxwell Frost, the congressman from Florida, Mazie Hirono, the senator from Hawaii, Democrats who are engaged in these protests on May Day with the radical left, where we caught Antifa, okay? We caught Palestinian jihadists. We caught members of CASA, a pro-immigrant group that advocates for criminal illegal aliens chanting in support of MS-13 members, okay? These are Democrat lawmakers hanging out with these degenerates, advocating for MS-13, advocating for Hamas jihadists, advocating for open borders. And they seem to think that this messaging is going to work for them ahead of 2026. So let's go ahead and play this clip. Democrat Senator Mazie Hirono on May Day being confronted by Loomer Unleashed.
Senator, why is freeing MS-13 gang members the Senate Democrats' official policy? Why are you guys freeing MS-13 gang members? Why are you guys trying to free them? Also, I have one more question for you, Senator. How does it feel to have spoken to an astroturfed, busted crowd? The crowd you just spoke to was literally busted. Do you have a comment on that? Why does Kamala and all the elected Democrats like to speak to busting crowds? I sure you don't want to answer about Senate Democrats embracing policy to bring back an illegal immigrant MS-13 gang member, Senator? Are you sure?
So again, be sure that you're following us on X at Laura Loomer and on X at Loomer Unleashed so that you never miss any of these updates or reports. Last but not least, tomorrow is the deposition of HBO and my lawsuit against Bill Maher. As you know, I'm suing Bill Maher for defamation after Bill Maher falsely accused me in September of last year of having a sexual affair with President Donald Trump in the aftermath of the presidential debate between President Trump and Kamala Harris. And so I sued Bill Maher for defamation. And of course, his show airs on HBO. And so I've also sued HBO. And tomorrow is the deposition of HBO. My attorney is going to be deposing HBO. I actually attended the deposition of Bill Maher on April 4th in Beverly Hills. And I had this lawsuit update that I wanted to read to all of you because many of you have asked me how my lawsuit is going. And HBO will be deposed tomorrow. So incredibly, Bill Maher has now asked the court to keep his deposition transcript and the video of the April 4th deposition for my defamation lawsuit confidential and under seal. Lawsuits in our country are not secret star chamber proceedings. They are generally open to the public, particularly in a case like mine, a defamation case, which is very simple but also egregious. Apparently, let's scroll down a bit, Bill Maher thinks he has a license to maliciously defame me and President Trump, as well as First Lady Melania Trump, by falsely broadcasting to the world that I had sex with President Trump. But to the contrary, Maher also contends that his testimony and disrespectful demeanor at his deposition should be sealed and kept from the public. So at a 5-hour-long deposition with Bill Maher in Beverly Hills, I was sitting across from Bill Maher, at a location in Beverly Hills. It was recorded on video. It's a video deposition. And Bill Maher is now saying that he wants the entire video deposition to be under seal so that nobody can ever watch it. And my question is why? Why don't you want people to see what you said, right? I mean, you should, if you're telling the truth about everything, why don't you want people to see what you said on video? So trying to accuse me and my attorney of being abusive during the deposition. It's just so outrageous, honestly, how these leftist pundits like to dish it out. But anytime anybody pushes back or tries to hold them accountable, they just cry and pretend that they're a victim. Apparently, Bill Maher thinks he has a license to maliciously defame me and President Trump, as well as First Lady Melania Trump, by falsely broadcasting to the world that I had sex with President Trump. But to the contrary, Maher also contends that his testimony and disrespectful demeanor at this deposition should be sealed and kept from the public. This is the pot calling the kettle black. HBO will be deposed in New York City this Wednesday, May 7th, that's tomorrow, by my attorney, Larry Klayman. The costs of these depositions are enormous, particularly when travel is included. The cost of the court reporter, the video recordings, and the deposition transcripts are also very costly. Let's scroll down. My deposition is scheduled for June 2nd. Please support my growing legal costs here so we can hold Bill Maher accountable for his defamation. So the deposition's tomorrow. And of course, I'm going to have to probably travel for my deposition, which is coming up in June. And I have to pay for the video transcripts for this deposition tomorrow. And so if you would like to help me hold Bill Maher accountable and you would like to support the costs associated with this legal battle, you can go to givesendgo.com/LoomerLawfare, givesendgo.com/LoomerLawfare, and this will support my general lawfare fund, for when people come after me or when I have to utilize legal support. Just about a month or so ago, I'm sure you saw that the Soros affiliated 1630 fund and the Hopewell Fund tried coming after me because of my reporting on the Tesla takedowns and the violent protests. And so I, of course, had to have my attorney respond to that, and that cost money. And now I'm having to get involved in very expensive litigation against Bill Maher because, well, you can't just allow people to get away with defaming you the way that Bill Maher defamed me. So if you want to support the costs associated with this litigation, again, you go to givesendgo.com/LoomerLawfare, givesendgo.com/LoomerLawfare. It's also posted in the chat. Let's take a couple questions before we sign off tonight. Again, we're live right now on Rumble and X, so please be sure that you are following my Rumble channel, rumble.com/Laura Loomer. Click the subscribe button. It's free to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Enable Rumble notifications on your phone. Head on over to X. Follow me at Laura Loomer and Loomer Unleashed. You can also click the subscribe button at the top of my profile where you can subscribe and become a monthly supporter for $7 a month on my X account. And you can also do the same on my Rumble channel by clicking the Get Loomered button, which will take you to my locals page. Somebody said, hi, Laura, what do you think about the N-word girl at the park and the money raised for her? Look, I think people can spend their money however they want to spend their money. People are donating to Carmelo Anthony, and he murdered a white boy. So, you know, look, there's outrage because of Carmelo Anthony's Give Send Go, and there's outrage because of Shiloh Hendricks's Give Send Go. People are free to choose how they spend their money in this country. So, you know, if it's a cause that you feel so passionate about, who am I to tell you what you can and can't donate to? Let's see. How is your new rescue dog doing with the other pups? Oh, Teddy is doing so well. He's so cute. I have 4 dogs now. Teddy is adjusting well. He's trying to potty train him. And so he's been undergoing crate training. And, well, that's always a difficult task in itself. But Teddy's doing very well. Thanks for asking, Marnie. I really appreciate that. All of the dogs are doing well. Paige Stringer said, how are you doing, Laura? Just wanted to see how you're doing. I'm doing all right. You know, busy. Always busy. It's always something to deal with, but I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Let's see. You can scroll up. Any more questions? Let's see. Also, some of you were asking in the comments earlier where you can read those reports, because I know sometimes it's hard to see all the graphics on the screen if you're sitting at home and you want to read the articles. You can visit loomered.com. Loomered.com is my website, loomered.com, like getting loomered, and you can see all of the daily exclusive reports. We do original news reporting at loomered.com. We are not a news aggregation site, and so be sure that you're checking out my website so that you get access to all of our exclusive reports and things that you're probably not going to see on the mainstream media. Every single day we break a ton of great reports that nobody else is talking about. Someone said, need to make Loomer merch. Yes, we are going to have some Loomer merch coming soon, so don't worry. Coming soon. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's episode of Loomer Unleashed. I hope you found it to be informative. Again, please be sure that you're following me on Rumble, rumble.com/Laura Loomer, and on X at Laura Loomer and Loomer Unleashed. And I will see you this Thursday for another live episode of Loomer Unleashed. Thank you and have a great evening.
There is a young female journalist, conservative journalist, by the name of Laura Loomer.
If America's men acted like Laura Loomer, our problems will be fixed in about 5 minutes.
Chained herself to
She
Twitter.
chained herself.